It was, at first glance, an ordinary pre-Christmas day, December 20th. How many of these had Juan experienced already? After all, he had just turned 39, with his jubilee looming in the next year. Juan looked around. Everything seemed quite mundane: the comfortably warm weather typical for their country, the lively choir of people lifting Christmas spirits near the little shop on the corner, children smashing piñatas, hoping to retrieve the coveted prizes in the form of sweets. And in the air, there was such an enticing scent of chocolate, cinnamon, and something tangy but familiar, yet Juan couldn't quite remember what that smell was. Nonetheless, the pre-Christmas celebration, characteristic of his native place, was in full swing. Yet, what was that smell? His deep thoughts were interrupted by the phone. It was Maria, his twin sister, calling. Yes, he had almost forgotten that this Christmas would be different from many previous ones, and, as unfair as it may seem, he was even somewhat glad about it. "Juan, hi, you didn't forget, did you?" Maria chattered in her characteristic manner. "How could I forget something like that?" He brushed her off. "They're expecting you there at 11 o'clock. Juan involuntarily glanced at his watch. It was nearly 10:40. There was still plenty of time for a walk home. "And you're not coming?" he asked, focusing his gaze on one of the banners offering a better life without worries. "No, are you kidding? I just flew in from Milan after closing the deal, and I still need to visit the beauty salon and buy gifts for my beloved nephews before the holidays. And you know, I can't be seen in such places, it ruins my image. So, you'll manage somehow." Juan sighed deeply, muttered fine, and hung up. His sister was in her element. She dumped responsibilities on him and directed from the shadows while he did the dirty work. In anticipation of Christmas, the Gonzalez twins had made a difficult, at least for Juan, decision. They had to send their mother, Sonora Gonzalez, to a nursing home. There were several reasons for this. Firstly, Fernanda Gonzalez had been living in Juan's house for a long time and had views on child-rearing that differed greatly from his and his wife's. Juan, when he was at home, not on business trips, heard his mother's complaints and his wife's hysterics every day. Of course, when Camila calmed down, she would apologize to his mother, but Juan understood that having two mistresses in one house was very difficult. Secondly, his mother's health problems had begun, and neither he nor Maria could provide her with proper care due to their work. Moreover, Sonora Gonzalez had become so capricious and demanding with age that it seemed she was intentionally feigning heart problems and blood pressure fluctuations just to keep the children close to her for an extra 5 minutes. Juan even missed his flight a couple of times and hastily bought a new ticket so as not to inconvenience his partners. Recently, Maria has been strongly urging him that a very good nursing home has opened in their neighborhood, and their mother will be very comfortable there. They will hire the best caregiver for her, cover medical checkups and treatment expenses, buy her a bunch of books, and she won't be bored there surrounded by her peers with similar outlooks on life and ideals. Fortunately, Juan's small business related to light industry and Maria's modeling agency allowed them to provide all this luxurious life for their mother. Yes, the Gonzalez family was not poor. But it wasn't always like this. Juan, strolling at a leisurely pace, began to reminisce about his childhood. There were always 3 of them: he, Maria, and Mom. He didn't remember his father, and Mrs. Gonzalez didn't like to talk about him, quickly changing the subject. They lived in a small house on the edge of the village, surrounded by a large number of neighbors on the left and right. Yes, they didn't have the best clothes and shoes, and they didn't live in mansions, but there was always food on the table, thanks in no small part to a small vegetable garden in the backyard, which Mom took care of very diligently until a certain point. Juan also remembered how a huge crowd of neighbors lined up for salsa prepared by his mom, and for other chili dishes. They said his mom had some secret recipe for making chili. But later, all of this faded away as they sold the house so that Juan and Maria could go to college, and then they were lucky to develop their businesses and buy decent houses. Mom moved in with Juan because age was catching up with her, and besides, she could help with the kids. Well, thoughts brought him back to square one. He needed to take Mom to the nursing home. because it would be better for her there. It seems Juan was just trying to reassure himself. Deep down, he understood that over the years, he had accumulated quite a lot of grievances, that they didn't live as they would have liked, that she demanded so much now. He hadn't felt any rest at home for a long time, just constant stress. And he just wanted a real celebration, as promised by Maria, who would come with her children to him on the 23rd, and in the evening of the 24th, they would have a truly loud party with friends and neighbors with loud music and dancing. Everything that Fernanda Gonzalez had complained about more than once and, one could say, forbade in her presence. Juan had already reached the house. It's time, he thought, and opened the door. "Mom," he called Mrs. Gonzalez. "Already time," came the old woman's hoarse voice as she slowly approached the door. "Well, let's go, son." "Mother, I ask you not to dramatize. We've discussed everything. You'll be better there." Juan reached out to his mother, took her bag in the other hand, and escorted Mrs. Gonzalez to the car. The weather seemed to be on her side. The sun, which had been shining just recently, was suddenly obscured by several gloomy clouds, which was a very rare occurrence in these parts. Juan felt the pressure of this weather tension heavily, but he kept a composed demeanor. Having sorted out all the final bureaucratic details at the reception and with the caregiver assigned to his mother, Juan bid her farewell with the utmost grace and a warm smile, promising to visit her again in a few days. Stepping outside the nursing home, Juan lit a cigarette. Smoking wasn't actually a habit of his, but for some reason, the situation had stressed him so much that he couldn't resist reaching for the cigarettes he had hidden from his wife. After finishing one cigarette, he felt some relief, then got into his car and drove home. His home and work routines absorbed him so completely that he didn't worry about his mother for the next couple of days. But on December 23rd, Christmas Eve, he paid her a visit, as agreed beforehand. Maria didn't accompany him this time, although she and her husband and children had already settled into their home, and Juan began to feel even more strongly that she was afraid to see her mother, to notice sadness or homesickness in her eyes, and perhaps even disappointment at how her daughter had treated her. Lost in thought, Juan once again caught that painfully familiar scent he had noticed on the street a few days earlier. He even wanted to ask his mother if she could identify it, but upon entering her apartment, he was immediately caught off guard by her complaints about how much she disliked it there, grumbling about dissatisfaction with the caregiver, and a slew of other issues that greatly exhausted Juan. In order not to get completely bogged down in his mother's animosity towards everything around her, Juan shifted his attention to the window, under which two local cats were settling a dispute. They were arguing over who owned a certain object, where generous old men and women lived, ready to share the delicious leftovers of their lunch. The subject of their dispute this time was a fish fillet, a very juicy piece that would suffice for a hearty snack. And their conflict held a wider range of emotions than Sonora Gonzalez's monologue, which sounded like the solo of a lonely, long-abandoned violin with untuned strings. Juan listened distantly, with no sympathy in his heart. He believed she was to blame for her situation, that her complaining nature had pushed her children and grandchildren away, and that she ended up here. Such a sudden shift in mood was again triggered by childhood traumas, which thundered in his head when Sonora Gonzalez complained that she had no one special to talk to here, that she missed her grandchildren terribly, and even Juan's wife, though, according to her, she was far from being an ideal housewife and mother. Juan loved his wife Camila very much and didn't allow anyone to speak ill, disrespectfully, or offensively of her, not even his mother. He was about to erupt, but quickly calmed down, realizing that his mother's character couldn't be changed or corrected, and it made no sense to waste his nerves on her on the eve of the holiday. But he still wanted to leave. He desperately wanted to go home, to hug his wife, play with the children, talk to his sister, maybe even go for a short walk around the neighborhood with the whole family. He just didn't want to be with her right now, as he felt some sort of repulsion from Fernanda at this very moment. He stood up, turned towards the exit to bid her farewell, but she interrupted him. "Son, have you already decided to leave?" "Wait a moment, I want to give you something," she said, handing him an envelope. "This is my Christmas gift to you, to all of you. I really ask you to go through its contents together with Maria. The gift is intended for both of you. Juan took the envelope, which wasn't particularly heavy, bid farewell to his mother quickly, promising to open the envelope without fail, and left the nursing home looking gloomy. Arriving home, he tossed the envelope somewhere and promptly forgot about it, not even mentioning it to his wife or Maria. The next day, Juan woke up to chaotic commotion in his house. Maria and Camila were loudly discussing how many guests would come today, what else needed to be prepared, what decorations for the table and home needed to be bought, where to place the music speaker, and other details that greatly concerned women to make a desired impression on guests. Juan, anticipating huge queues at supermarkets, greeted his loved ones with a smile of resignation. After breakfast, they set off for shopping. In the evening, the long-awaited party took place. Close friends and a few neighbors gathered, totaling about 20 people, not including Juan and Maria's family. Delicious dishes, toasts around the friendly table, wild dances, fireworks, all of this merged into a joyful celebration of Christmas. Juan and Maria managed to give their children a real holiday, the kind they wanted from their mother in childhood but never fully received. The main difference between their childhood holidays and the holidays Juan and Maria organized for their children, he believed, besides endless complaints from their mother and beyond, was the presence of a father in the children's lives. Their region was famous for its rich family traditions, so in some way, Juan blamed his mother for their father's departure. Well, how could it be otherwise, he thought. She's constantly dissatisfied with everything, imposes her truth, and in the end, Maria and I were always made to feel guilty, from the youngest age. And when we got older and started to push back with reasoned arguments, Mother began redirecting our attention to her numerous health problems, thereby manipulating us. With these thoughts, Juan sighed, downed his shot, and looked towards his wife, who was dancing around the Christmas tree with Maria and the children. Camila, of course, was nothing like his mother. She was undeniably beautiful, but the reason Juan chose her had nothing to do with her beauty. She possessed that inner femininity often lacking in the modern world, but so desired by men. She was a wonderful mother and wife, a homemaker. She filled their home with such coziness that Juan rushed home every time, fulfilled her small whims, and delighted her and the children with gifts. In general, their home was a complete contrast to what Juan and his sister experienced in their childhood. Finally, it was time to open the gifts. Juan and Camila handed a slightly humorous gift to their neighbors. It was a souvenir plate, in the center of which were the names of the couple, and around the edge were the names of their 4 children. The center was made in the shape of a sun, with rays extending to the little planets. The neighbors appreciated the gift as they loved such memorabilia. Maria received a travel kit, a mask, a pillow, a small bag, as she often complained about having difficulty with flights. The children received a set for creativity and a radio-controlled helicopter, and the joyful children went to their room, leaving the adults alone. Later, Camila and Maria put the children to bed, then lowered the music, and heartfelt adult conversations ensued, lasting until 5 in the morning. Finally, the adults dispersed to their homes and rooms. Juan and Camila settled in the bedroom. But, as Juan thought, he had barely closed his eyes for 5 minutes when their youngest son, 5-year-old Diego, burst into the room with a loud exclamation. "Mom! Dad!" he shouted. "Look what I found!" And the little one handed them the same white small envelope that Mrs. Gonzalez had given to Juan. Juan glanced at the clock. It was already around 11 o'clock. Gathering his thoughts a little, he asked his son where he found it, while Camila, puzzled, looked at both of them. "We were flying the helicopter with Penelope and our cousins, and it landed on the fridge. Penelope let me climb on a chair and get it. Along with the helicopter, I found this," Diego blurted out in one breath, so his parents wouldn't interrupt or start scolding him, and handed the letter to his father. "It smells like Grandma," he suddenly said. "It's a letter from her." Juan waved his hand slightly. "Diego, go call Aunt Maria. We're all gathering by the tree in 5 minutes to see Grandma's gift." "Got it." Diego saluted and left his parents' bedroom. Juan thought to himself, that smell again, so close, and Diego even said it's so much like Grandma. He looked at Camila. I don't know what's there, but I suspect it's some letter she really wanted us to open, and I forgot, he said, looking at her. After all, she's my mom and the grandmother of our children. Let's go. Juan and Camila went downstairs, where their children and nephews obediently awaited them. Shortly after them, Maria came down, overtaking her husband, shouting for Juan to hand her the envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it, and they all saw several sheets of notebook paper filled on both sides, as well as some kind of key. Maria found where the letter began. Read aloud, that's why we're all gathered here, right? Juan remarked, anticipating that his mother would say a few nice words about each person and admit her mistakes on some matters, and also guessing that the key was lying on the coffee table. Maria began to read, My dear children, Juan and Maria, on this Christmas day I want to tell you. Her gaze slid away, and tears began to fall sharply from her eyes. Maria, you're not particularly sentimental. What did Mother do to move you like this? Juan asked, pulling the letter from her hands. He read the letter up to the same point as Maria, then fell into a stupor and fell silent. Camila realized something was wrong, asked Juan to sit next to Maria, and began reading the letter herself, while Maria and Juan remained in a kind of stupor but still caught every word read by Camila. My dear children, Juan and Maria, on this Christmas day, I want to finally tell you the truth. I am not your biological mother. I apologize for hiding this from you for almost 40 years, but I had my reasons. This year, especially in connection with my stay in the nursing home and discussing the whole situation with some of my new acquaintances here, I gathered courage and decided to tell you my story without embellishment from beginning to end. I grew up in a very large and close-knit family. You might wonder, where were your grandparents and numerous uncles and aunts then? I was the youngest, fifth, child in the family, and our family followed all the traditions, perhaps something you've always lacked. At 28, I got married and desperately wanted to become a mother to pass on all my experience to my children. Even my relatives urged me on, saying when I would finally become a mother. But time passed, we were married for 5 years, and I still couldn't get pregnant. Eventually, I found out I was infertile. It was Christmas Eve. At that moment, my relatives turned away from me, cursing me in every way possible. My husband left for some younger girl. And I was left completely alone on the eve of Christmas. But miracles happen, and I was lucky. On the morning of December 25th, I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened it, I saw 2 babies, a boy and a girl, who, upon seeing me, reached out their tiny hands to me. There was no mother or anyone else nearby, and I brought you into the house. There was only a note in which the girl disclosed only your names and dates of birth. She did not reveal her name and surname. She said she was very poor to support 2 children, but she was a budding actress and had been offered a cameo role in a film, but she needed to fly to the USA, and she couldn't afford to take the children with her. She was told about me and my sorrow, and she decided to leave you with me. I can't say it was easy for me, as I suddenly became a mother, but I honestly tried my best. I could vent my emotions on you, but I must admit that it was all my anger and disappointment at my family and my ex-husband who left me because I couldn't be a mother by nature. But I was and still am a mother, at least I believe so. And I really hope you feel the same way. You're probably puzzled about the key lying in front of you. I realized that I should provide you with at least the bare minimum: food, water, shelter, education. But I had another goal. I wanted to give each of you a dream, because I never realized my own dream, as I gave up everything I had to raise you. I think you remember that we had a ranch and that there was a crowd of people lining up for portions of my dishes. I dreamed that my husband and I would support this ranch, and then our children would help us with it. But with you 2, 4 months old, in my arms, I had to bury my dream so that you could stand on your own feet. My goal was to save $2 every day, $1 for each of you. I sold some of my valuables, exchanged seeds and fruits for this money. Sometimes I went hungry myself. Then I had to sell the ranch. Yes, Maybe you didn't have the best toys, not the newest gadgets, but over time you managed to understand the value of money and started earning yourselves. Each of you now has your own, albeit small, company. I am very proud of you in your endeavors. And this key is from the safety deposit box where all this accumulated sum is kept, divided between the two of you. Remember, Juan, how I once asked you to take me to the bank, but asked you not to come with me. Even though you have a business, you understand deals. But I insisted and went alone. I managed to open a deposit with a 10% annual interest rate for 5 years, and in this very box, you will find this sum, which you can take at your disposal and spend it as you see fit. With enormous endless love. Your mom. P.S. Gifts for the grandchildren are in my room if you haven't found them yet. By the time Camila finished reading the letter, Maria was already sobbing on her husband's shoulder, who was trying his best to calm her down, and Juan wasn't limited to just a few tears, as 2 rivers ran down his cheeks. Still in a daze, Juan asked, "Do you smell that?" "Yes, it smells like Grandma," little Diego said again. "That's Mom's perfume," Maria interjected. "With saffron." And then it just hit him. He remembered that Sonora Gonzalez often used saffron in her dishes when he was a child. Later, she bought herself perfumes with this scent, quite subtle but distinctive. He could smell it then while walking down the street. Apparently someone, like his mom, added it to the dish or used it as a flavoring, and even in the nursing home, being near her room. And now, holding such a touching and dear-to-the-heart letter. "That's it, everyone get ready. Let's go get Mom," Juan commanded. They quickly got ready and headed to the nursing home in 2 cars. Juan and Maria were the first to enter, but they were stopped and told that Sonora Gonzalez had been taken to the hospital. Recovering from the shock of realizing that they might lose her because of their resentment and their mom's secret, they rushed to the hospital. Juan and Maria approached the reception desk. "Hello. Sonora Gonzalez has arrived. How is she?" Maria asked anxiously. "Let me check right away," replied the receptionist. A few seconds later, her expression changed abruptly. "I'm sorry, but I must inform you that Sonora Gonzalez passed away about an hour ago." Juan felt like he had been struck by lightning. He sat down on the couch, the words drifting past him. Camila shook him, then Maria approached, but the whole world seemed to dim. He didn't know how long he sat there while Maria and her husband bustled around, talking to doctors and running back and forth for some reason. He didn't understand why there was all this commotion. Then joyful Maria approached him, crouched in front of him, and lifted his face, staring directly into his eyes. "Juan!" she cried. "Juan, wake up. They made a mistake. They all made a mistake. Mom is alive and waiting for us in the ward." Juan looked at her with a very lost expression, not fully grasping what his sister was saying. For a few seconds, he thought she was speaking words of comfort, but then the true meaning of her words sank in. He immediately got up and asked where to go. As it turned out, 2 women with the last name Gonzalez had been admitted to the hospital that morning, and unfortunately, one of them had passed away due to life-incompatible injuries. Fernanda, on the other hand, had been admitted due to high blood pressure, as she was very anxious about spending her first Christmas away from her children and grandchildren. Moreover, she was extremely nervous because her children had not contacted her despite the fact that they were supposed to learn her secret yesterday, but they hadn't reached out to her. She had begun to think they had completely rejected her. A few minutes later, the whole family gathered outside Fernanda Gonzalez's hospital room, and she gestured for them to come in. Juan and Maria immediately rushed to hug her, kneeling by her hospital bed and expressing words of gratitude and remorse. They repeated over and over that she was their only mother, and they couldn't dream of anyone else, and that they were sorry for sending her to the nursing home the day before Christmas. Sonora Gonzalez cried tears of joy, but through her tears, she smiled and said that she didn't love them any less for their mistake, that she loved her entire family endlessly. After Fernando was discharged, she returned to her son's home. Everything went back to normal, But Juan noticed that the relationship between his mother and wife had become warmer. His mother was less clingy to her, and Camila consulted her more and completely stopped complaining about her clinging. Several months later, on his mother's birthday, Juan and Maria announced to her how they had decided to use the money from the trust. They said they were selling both of their homes, adding the amount from the trust, and buying a huge house with a ranch for the whole family. They planned to set aside a summer cottage greenhouse where their mom could pursue her favorite hobby. This was their way of repaying her for all the care and sacrifices she had made while raising them. And, of course, to help her fulfill her cherished dream. "Mom," Juan said, "we want to help you with your ranch. Look, you have so many helpers. A whole 8 of us. We really want to try your dishes, like when we were kids," Maria said, making a pleading face. Sonora Gonzalez stood there, tears streaming down her face. It was the best gift in her life. No, not the best. The best gift she found on her doorstep almost 40 years ago. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.